to go.
I'm good to go as well.
Sounds good. I affirm the resolution the appropriation of outer space by private entities is unjust. Observation 1. The resolution is a values question, which means that the asked burden is to prove the statement true and the next burden is to prove it false. The app does not have to prove solvency, but only the appropriation of outer space is unjust. This is because the resolution lacks an actor and a verb. Forcing the actor to prove solvency is impossible, since the resolution doesn't provide an action to solve for an actor to even engage in that action. Proving solvency would require the tacking out of words which is infinitely regressive and renders the resolution meaningless. My standard is respecting human dignity. Human dignity is the prerequisite to all other values, L 95. Things have value only because they're valued by human beings. Values driven from the fact they serve our interests and desires. Value words convert derivative value on those things. Those value words must themselves have value independent of and superior to the derivative values they create. Human beings as value words must be valued for their own sakes. And capitalism uses workers as a means to an end by using them as instruments and forcing them to generate wealth for the wealthy, which violates their human dignity. Hasami 78. Capitalism is a system of domination and exploitation associated with private property and the means of production since class against class. Production is impelled by profit, not by the satisfaction of human needs. The workers use as a means for generation of material wealth. Capitalism achieves the greatest measure for the greatest number through the wage labor. The proletariat class is forcing creating wealth for the others and misery for itself. Capitalism master wealth by exploiting labor power of the workers. And there's no longer outside of capitalism. Their existence outside of non-capitalist market regard to realize surplus values immediately simultaneously internalized the surplus value is transformed back into capital. Expensive totalitarian economic system settles for nothing but totality, the occupation of all space and consumption of all things. Hart and Negri 2000. Intrinsic relationship between capitalism and expansion. Capital operates for reconfiguration of the boundaries of inside and outside. Capital always proposes border and internalizes this new space. Every limit appears as a barrier to be overcome out of constitutes the ever-present point of crisis. The essence of capital crisis for capital a normal condition that is not an end but a mode of operation. Capital must expand its realm. The only effective solution for its capital to look outside itself. Capital is an organism that cannot sit itself without constantly looking beyond its boundaries. Its outside is essential. The search for additional on-state capital drives capital toward a kind of imperialism characterized by the pillage and theft. Capital ransacks the whole world. And capital source must be quenched with new blood and must continually seek new frontiers. At the point of crisis, when capital is faced with the finitude of humanity and earth, the core of capitalist reproduction necessarily implies imperialist expansion. Imperialism cannot be confronted by destroying capitalism itself. And outer space is turned into capital's new internalized outside, a new domain in which it can expand for further exploitation of resources and investment of surplus capital. Space development and exploration are mere spatial fixes for capitalism to oppose its inevitable internal contradictions and empty out of all productive possibility. Dickens 10. Expansion of the cosmos offers processes for exploiting new materials. Raw production of materials is wholly dependent on production of surplus value. Capital is now stocking outer space in the search for new resources and raw materials, and outside is needed only which surplus capital can be invested. Crisis stems from exploiting zones of probability of surplus capital. Also, product of recurring crises, particularly those with declining economic profitability. These crises are followed by attempted fixes in distinct geographic regions. The attempt is to fix capitalism crises. No guarantees that such fixes will really correct an essentially unstable social economic system. Their short-term solution projects for colonization. They attempt to make new types of social fix. And new space actors have already begun their colonization of the cosmos. Astro mining, space travel, a beach resort on Mars, all spoils from venture capital's most recent trophy hunt. Jamalson Holland 19. Logic of capitalism dictates that capital should seek to expand outwards. New space sectors serve to resolve a series of crises of capitalism. Outer space serves the renewal of innovation, helping to avert crisis by pushing capital out of stagnation. Also, surplus capital promise to deliver valuable resources, innovation, communication, services to capitalists back on Earth. And defense contractors and space corporations have captured the U.S. Congress with massive lobbying to ensure the control of outer space at the expense of social programs. Ensures that the wars that plague the Earth will be exported to the heavens. Grossman 21. Two industry giants put the resources together and ensure their control domination. The U.S. Congress, both political parties, locked down when it comes to arms race into space and colonies of heavens for profits. Approved the Congress of the creation of the Space Force. Dominant military states enable the U.S. to see, hear, and target everything on Earth. A global Leviathan military capability. Space must be militarized and weaponized. Costs enormous cuts in social and economic environmental spending using space technology to control Earth on behalf of corporate capital. Pentagon looking to a future of space be fully privatized and a new gold rush would ensue. Corporations ignoring the treaties, UN's treaties would control the shipping lane. Space Force would be used by these space entrepreneurs as their own private pirate forces and ensure they control destruction. Recreate the global war system, the seat of greed, war, environmental devastation. And financial frenzy will turn to bloodlust. Outer space privatization is most likely cause of armed conflict. Dickens Arm Article 7. Victory becomes the basis for a new global war in which the military outer space will be an important part. Capital will inevitably move elsewhere in a process to confront other capitalist enterprises over access. Private enterprises compete for shrink opportunities for accumulation and especially for armed conflict. Investments in outer space would form of future wars over resources. Outer space outer space is limitless voids where capitalism can divert resources from climate change and reify earthly inequality. 10 and 21. Instead of pointing the way into a more sustainable future for humanity, these imagineers wrap their future visions into colonization. Imagery will continue to justify exploitation and genocide. But what's the harm in context of outer space? Ignores the fact that colonization in outer space is a very terrestrial undertaking. Steeping capitalism, space exploration today is driven by changing outer space, making fitted for the logics of profit and territorial control. We're in the thick of it. Establishment of the U.S. Space Force, ratification of the Artemis Accords to make outer space safe for capitalism. Space exploration also has the cost of wealth all these have acquired, which puts them into the position to reach for the stars and greater profits. Built on unleashed neoliberalism, the vision of humanity in space is designed for a few and wealthy. It builds on the back of many, and costs could increase even further. future. While humanity is facing climate change, which urges its defense to sustainable solutions fast, others offer the seemingly quick fix of banning Earth altogether. Unfeasible, the idea is gaining traction and thus withdrawing resources from climate change. The newest folk about hyper-masculine performances to block our view of tangible benefits space exploration should invest in. Current Mars exploration projects offer insights that atmosphere exchanges information that could have proven valuable in our battle against climate change. And the Earth is barreling towards existential climate change caused by capitalism. We have 4 years, very 21. To have a chance of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius global emissions peak, I need to peak by 2025 and then plunge rapidly towards zero. We have 11 years now, we have 4. They show the world on track for 2.7 to 3.6 degrees Celsius by warming of 2100. This is an uninhabitable world due to capitalism. What are the drivers of carbon-based and unsustainable ways of life? Look at capitalism, structural dependence on endless economic growth, globalization, unstable trade. A capitalist economy is oriented towards monetary objectives, not improving the well-being. It's not about creating the current structure of our economies and societies. We need deeper structural change in our economic system. And finally, private appropriation of outer space supercharges all the impacts of capitalism, colonialism, environmental destruction, and poverty. OSF 21. Rhetoric and history of celestial exploration reveal how capitalism, colonialism, and corporations have always been violently intertwined. A utopian vision to humanity in space that attempts to provide technological solutions to problems that capitalism has caused. This Malthusian logic underpins our arguments about the inevitability of humanity's growth and the necessity of expanding into space. Short-term problems explains such as poverty and pollution, long-term problems such as running out of energy. Basis points that we must expand to the stars. Emphasize the cyclical logic of capitalist growth we must expand in order to keep expanding. Imperialist conception of ownership transforms space into an empty frontier where certain individuals can project notion that the imperial expansion only way for an ever-growing population and old colonial appeal. Infinite need for resource wealth, poverty, and pollution that Bezos admits as short-term problems are deeply meshed in capitalism cycle of attraction and currently causing Earth's climate crisis. Thus, I affirm. I stand ready for open for cross-examination.
Awesome. First question is, what's appropriation?
The taking of property for your own use.
Okay, how is space tourism appropriation then?
It's not, but we're not talking about space tourism.
Awesome. Do governments have the spatial fix?
They can if like the capitalist like corporations capture it, but again, like the biggest problem is these private appropriations. So like we don't like capitalism expense less if we don't have this private appropriation of outer space.
Okay, are your impacts consequential?
I have some of them are, and the others are just the violation of human dignity. So capitalism is intrinsically unjust because it violates human dignity, but it also causes all these other problems. So we can prove it's unjust.
Okay, if you have impacts that are consequential, then why doesn't solvency matter?
Oh, okay. So we need this, I guess, to clarify that. All the app has to show is that like the private appropriation of outer space is unjust, right? So like the private appropriation of space is unjust because it exacerbates and strengthens capitalism, which causes extinction, right? So I don't need to solve for capitalism. I just have to show that like it strengthens and expands. I don't have to solve for the impacts. Again, I just have to show that it strengthens. Okay, sorry.
But then why do you vote F?
Because the private appropriation of outer space is unjust because it exacerbates and strengthens capitalism, which causes all these problems.
Okay, sure. What is human dignity?
This intrinsic worth that everyone has.
Everybody has this intrinsic worth.
Yes, every human being has.
How do you measure between impacts under human dignity?
Well, you don't. Like, everyone's worth infinite.
So why does it work as a framework if you don't measure between human dignity?
Well, if you can't, as long as like you don't violate human dignity and respect that human dignity, like that's the only impact that like matters.
That's the only impact that matters in the round.
Well, under this framework, but like if you come up with a UTIL framework, I can also win under that.
Why?
Because again, capitalism not only does it violate, not only is it intrinsically unjust because it violates human dignity, also like if you're working under a consequences framework, it is unjust because it causes all these problems, and voting neg exacerbates and increases those problems.
Okay, sure. That's all the time I need. I'll send the dog. The order is going to be one off case starting on the observation, framing, and then just like the actual advantages. Let me know when everyone's ready.
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
Alright, cool. 1 second, I'm just making sure my notifications are all on. Okay, cool. 7 minutes on the clock. Starting now. Central colonialism, the structure of technology, is not an invented patterning of social relations that renders indigenous land and life infinitely fungible. Paper 17. We're gonna come to a new place, not only just paper, just central colonialism is happening right now. That they had the land is problem in separating indigenous people from the land, we had something bad. Indigenous people are well, illegal, is an animal right there to reproduce. You might consider self with other land, other people. It's a taste packing barrier for they make purpose of planning subjugation, definitely such as more humiliation, patterning such relationship as only there's one in the psychological system, calling the rights and patterning of that situation over the Lord. It is becoming free because we're going to social constitution, modernity, freedom. The destruction of relationships, land constitutes ontological violence, a theoretical frame that cannot theorize land, can understand that should be the set of colonial situations. Talking again, 17. The United States indigenous people have been used removing tourism, business, and colonization, to international horizons, colonial state, regard to appropriation, indigenous land, and movement, colonialism, the most important considered land. Settlers will make indigenous land a new home and state settlers, disruption, indigenous land, profound ontological violence, not to really continue to be rooted, they all confusion, the colonial structure, not in fact, that is raised about race, like a relation to land, and race, in order for settlers to make a business, not in destroy indigenous people and live there for them to line policy lands, because the indigenous people to raise and manage both. The warning is a form of setup in place that renders our space a lifeless way upon which the can infinitely protect colonial fantasy of the foul country be more ethical, communist space, celebration. The question of this space is not privacy, good privacy, tap to the body, how we should understand spaces, because the warning says the word colonialism does not make them anti-colonial. Their understanding space is still bad. It's all 20. This is what takes back to the outer space that continue for that perpetuate indigenous invisibility, is into colonial fantasies, into the future of indigenous people struggle against the impact, the desperation of warmer and conversation of being from everything, imagining several informalities on our planet, which are the concept power, imagination, impact, causing past and future, negating, and see the first world people, psychology, government, and there's a terrible scheme that there are no indigenous people, so you just feel kind of just wasted right there, of indigenous law, and images, spaces, and empty world, makes it possible to go into plans and victim free legal parameters on the rest of the appears to be feared and they violate equity, civil poverty, human respect, most liberal governments of these subversion, free to colonial terms of appreciating as a life that was supported as a quantity, which is something kind of adequate and just as a harmful activity to contribute to people, this is an environment that cross careful government and man and the promoted is that it's state destruction, reducing ecological harms and knowledge and land use that woman cars, this knowledge man comes with this reason nullified. Cut the card there. This is the best card in the debate. Marxism is not radical anti-colonial ideology, but one rooted in now of our responsibility to land peace be at the end of the debate because it's souls to ask and also about space how it means city. Marxism is really the same also on mutant and atom space and discarded search room with the one put the looking inspiration from the universe and place the logical sequence of Europeans. It is the revolution of American, it is more of the European culture between getting new Marxist imperialism being a spiritual being making getting spiritualized. There are two opposing Marxism over inside the fertility tradition of spiritualized and you don't go into dehumanizing another bird republicans. The moment are covered words and victory usually justify which capitalism develop humanity and the way which they control profit Marxism develop humanity and family is positive is the most efficient act of the words for purple every revolution. The European is for force European steps to explore the people in the environment itself. Let's say we are revolution Marxism in the world whether it's natural lines but it's true this is that Marxism is going to perfection imperfection of this quantum which is destroying the soul of only which to the soul of this national ship in order to do Marxism only the national system of power to the Europeans will be also different than Americans if people will remain the same or to me speak about like the people in relationships until it's option that despite the American generation right to help us from the only matter in which many Americans do more than Marxism will be to become a proletariat in order for a doing for the Marxism and Americans have to subdivide for it or form of the users are used to consider the number of people they have personal way packed with Soviets referred to international courts and intended travel people and acceptable sacrifice to China see the same thing. Let's see Vietnam and the team Marxism Britain and they just travel people like terrorists would be and bring things to colonize for the plan the same as European colonizing for the time and John Blake Hamilton also well what is European culture there's another way is the way that achievements do not have to be mother humans have to be harmonious relations to serve and eliminate harmony which is not take political power because it is natural just the way we don't want the power we want it to disappear cut the card there in the future we are thinking about the moon next before here we go friends to understand the earth and sky fundamentally separate ignore the intimate connections between bodies that don't take culture the rejection of white relationship in space and space of form relational force that recognize their infinite obligation to think about giving back to the truth and all humans you are so less attached to utilitarian analysis of space to level 20 the responsibilities that increase our relational relatives relatives and attack on the sharp how to go to the place of the type of the company developing because the whose bodies from the source and the order the sense of action who came to all these communities and taking the relation who don't take on the other people to correct them to like places and use people who get second and what's ideas of the tool to control less we had to play government through police responsibility and care but if you look at that I put some wrong her what is the country no longer there there's just shortage of space country as we still see had the domestic no so right is my land environment so have to secretary and I start from my city and secretary of the two judges just what you say country who have random relationship judges the short and secretary will place the model separate separate and every single marriage and the matching relationship with the person boy no features back and on 2010 culmination or is it the song that we create that people is the long you just something and shame will go hold you remind us of the obligation to society country how plans to update from breaking these bonds we're skipping the Tucking Yang 14 Leduc evidence going straight to framework or interpretation of what if he's in epistemological project before you about to come to the plantation ways ideological underpinnings of about should we embrace that they're going commercially that tips away from the endless what about the settlement of energy community conversations that move towards innocent talking and Yang 12 it is mentioned middle side moves to settle in the context of which part of it still moves to the terrible question well you also look at what was on the concept of research what it means to be answered on this obligation because it was definitely not a time of the vision to act to that mentioned reality therapeutic means removing national conditional concept of project the only on the right side of the limits God and the umbrella of that big and accountability. This that way that is sort of the students of the life of the cabinet from me today versus the use to prioritize models made that makes them safe versus all over one to see K proper evidence justifies why thinking through land versus land is a parallel movement that choose a movement favor of the only interpretation I understand land was making create good politics onto the case proper. First off, observation on the observation still fun. I use the parents will have more orientation sort of resolution becomes that debate, which will be definitely weird basis about policy and consequences from middle office listening proves that they don't solve to you saying prioritization and not doing an action speed liberalism where they say they're wrong, they don't do anything about it. If you always someone negative risk of policy, be saying policy doesn't matter. That's the need debate about effective strategies against success and capitalism that independently turn case. We don't have to say prioritization just only burdens to negative and firmers to do by credit that the nails that appropriate the representations the app on the framing on human dignity to one is terrible violence the way to human dignity because it's special you present means one is possible to way two is aspects of our framing is that better one is more acceptable change the way we evaluate our actions humanity only aspect of the person is able to account for self value knowledge balance onto the case page proper one there's no solvency private space will expand the space around hold the line not there since it's appropriation hello 21 sisters are not related to literal no question for everyone nervous time to get Mario's already made us already kind of already had to just tell virgin I have all these 2,000 people around 250 sorry, $250 each in term, banning the purchase of little force, I'm bringing to mess more to space tourists. That's my divide by hell, 21. Particularly lying to launch foreign news of activities from frugal hundreds and higher than you looking at all these releases her dollars and that's to release by 100,000 space tourism will have been warm type by nearly 1 degree Celsius to there's no uniqueness for space space. It's supported by the government will never cease to exist instead it's funny will go from private space in the future national level government will see a strong reason for today. 3, yes, you do view the space there knows for your own evidence and that's bad to understand space is free for the use of humanity not opportunity so that we have logistical with the hands and clean race and native physical life God and birdie so that time which I must hold 19. I think these have to share that our space is not subject to variation to raise the number and the short percentage which is clear how it is actually been developed that based on the comments and data which is related to have a kind of without this is as the comments and stages of probable ways of the other profitable into outer space protocol means much shelter and fade away Thor and Gotham 21 and Dickens and Armor and governments are captured by lawmakers settled to these Spanish which by nature brass and private communicable to the colonization that means no fault to the card proves the settlement governments of the US don't need private corporations to go to space and actively support colonization. I can send a Mark doc.
If you could.
Yeah.
And then let me know when you're ready for cross-ex.
Yeah, just give me a sec. Let me just do this. Okay, it's in. I'm ready for cross-ex.
Sounds good. Here. Okay. So time. Okay, starting at the very. Or actually, what does the world of the alt look like?
The world of the alternative is a. Sorry. It's a refusal where we understand our relationships to space, not as something to be a resource to be extracted or even for the good of humanity, but rather a unique relationship that natives have, where space is not considered, property or land, but something that is intrinsic to Earth itself, and sort of creating these communities. Part of it is sort of like a refusal of looking space in that way.
So the case is criticizing how the AF looks at space.
And yeah, it's criticizing the way the affirmative looks at space and why that's specifically bad. That's what our means evidence really isolates.
So, okay, how exactly does the AF look at space?
Okay, so if you see the Shamus and Holland 19 card, which you read in your 1AC that we cite, it talks about how the affirmative looks at space as something to benefit from. Even if you're resourcing. Even if you're not capitalist in nature, we critique the way socialism and Marxism understand space as something of resources to be taken for the good of the earth, which is proven in sort of like the evidence that we cite that you also read in your 1AC.
So how does the K view space? Does it not want to engage with space, or like how does it use space, or does it like what does that look like?
Saying that, so the alternative is sort of a lot of our card talks about how native people and different native tribes have special relationships to space, calling itself like sky country, wherein these relationships are inherently about giving to the land and giving back. Are inherently sort of relationships that give back and give to, which don't understand it as sort of like resources to be extracted, even for the good of humanity.
Okay, cool. And then, so how exactly, when looking at your framework, how do you weigh under your framework?
Right, so we're saying that weighing under a framework of incommensurability, that means dedicating ourselves to decolonization. What that could look like is different strategies for decolonization, and what it means to give like the land back.
Okay, cool. That's gonna be end of cross-ex. Let me start taking prep starting. Oh wait, let me fix my head. Starting now. Sorry, keep running prep. Stop it there. Let me drop the doc real fast. So the orders is going to be just going down the app and then the neg. Yeah, just down the flow. It's pretty straightforward.
Is there a doc?
Yeah, it's just the overview, so it's not going to be that important.
Is it the same name?
No, it's my computer's all weird, so I have to change the name of everything.
Yeah, that's fine. I just got it.
Cool.
Me too, I'm downloading it. Give me just a sec. Okay, I'm good to go.
Judge, you good?
I'm good to go.
Sounds good. Capitalism is ascending to heavens, perpetuating a violent system is driving the planet to a brink of endless resource war. Private appropriation is unjust. 4 warrants. 1. Hillel 95 and Husami 78 show that capitalism violates human dignity and is inherently unjust. 2. Dickens 10 proves that spatial fixes prolong the lifeblood of capitalism and its destruction. 3. Critical social programs are cut to defend the wealth accumulated in space. That's Grossman 21. And 4. Temin 21 and Berry 21 show that extending capitalism into space and gas space accidental climate change, which capitalism is driving us to the brink of. This is just to the observation first off. Okay, so they say that there's a double bind, either there's like a methods debate or they have to prove solvency, but like this is a false dichotomy. Again, as we show, they don't engage at all with our warrants that basically talk about all the resolutions gives the app the ability to do is to say it's unjust. There's no act, there's nothing to solve, there's no action to solve. So to say that we have to solve for a ban is infinitely regressive and actually renders the resolution meaningless. They don't engage with this at all. So the app doesn't have the ability to solve for anything in the first place. You just vote off because we prove it's unjust, because it exacerbates and extends capitalism, which is root cause of all these problems and intrinsically violates human dignity. My opponent talks about this as peak liberalism and turns the entire case because you don't have to prove anything. But again, if we won't have a resolution that renders it meaningless. It's not that the app doesn't want to do anything; it doesn't have the ability to do anything. And this takes us to our framework. The only response to this is like, this is a terrible framework because there's no way to weigh under it. They also can't weigh under their framework, right? So like, and there is ways to weigh under human dignity. Whatever respects human dignity and whatever doesn't violate human dignity is what should be prioritized and good for this framework. And specifically, they don't get to the fact that like capitalism intrinsically violates human dignity. So therefore, extending this through this spatial fix, exacerbating capitalism through this private appropriation of our space is unjust because it exacerbates and violates human dignity. And then, again, they lay off a couple solvency deficits, but we don't have to engage with that because, again, we can't prove solvency because there's no action to prove solvency of. And they talk about how governments will engage in this spatial fix, but if we don't have the private appropriation of space, then there won't be this extension and expansion of space. You know, these private companies can't just dump surplus value into the government in the first place, so you don't have this turn. And then onto the K. So first off, onto the alt, perm do both. They don't give any reason. Like the app in of itself criticizes settler colonialism and talks about how this like private appropriation space is intertwined with colonialism. Like the app is anti-settler colonialism, and if we can do both, we can both say that like private appropriation of outer space is unjust because of capitalism, and also engage with all of the negative stuff. The only links that they actually have against the app is that we conceptualize space to, something to be used, but they just criticize like. So do they. Like, they talk just differently. They talk about how Native people use space differently. And actually, the app about how we need to preserve space to protect, you know, this Native heritage and, like, protect, from this other colonial violence. Like, the app criticizes and does all the same stuff as the app, like, or the same thing as the K. So there's like, this solves for literally all of their offense. We can do both. We can both condemn that, private appropriation of space because it's capitalist and also settler colonialist. We look at this whole like, hey, the root cause of settler colonialism in the first place is capitalism. The reason why there was this violence against Native people is because you had these private companies who could privately appropriate, like the East Indian Trading Company that wiped out massive amounts of Native people in India, and these private corporations that came over into North America and wiped out these natives. This shows that capitalism is the root cause of settler colonialism. So we need to solve this, which takes us to their framework. Again, there's a counter role of the ballot of trying to whoever criticizes capitalism most because it's the root cause of settler violence. And so even if you don't buy that, the app still does this and still meets under their framework because the perm solves for it. There's literally no risk of offense on the neg because of the fact that there's no link, and the perm solves for everything. Like the app is doing the same thing as the neg does. You can see this clearly. Like we're criticizing this colonialist violence. We're just doing it from the perspective of Marxism. Like we can have the perm, we can have these different methodologies which allow us to combine them, to criticize capitalism from multifaceted ways, which increases the success and advocacy. That's the net benefit to the perm. We can increase the advocacy of criticizing the structure of violence, that we can do it from multiple perspectives, both from Marxism and from this other colonialist, literature perspective, which allows us to deconstruct and combat it. So thus you vote app.
Okay, I have. Is it 4 or 5 minutes of prep for this tournament? 4, right?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. 4 minutes starting now. Okay, that's 4 minutes. Order is going to be on the like observation debate, then the K.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay. Are you ready too, Lucas?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Sorry. 6 minutes on the clock starting now. First on the observation, it's not a false dichotomy. It makes no sense insofar they have conceded the fact that insofar as the affirmative never has to prove solvency, it means we can't weigh between different strategies of resistance against oppression, which is definitely bad on their own framing. It makes no coherent sense. It means the affirmative wins every single debate if they don't have to prove why they solve their own impact. It doesn't matter about the wording of the resolution. You've seen policy acts on this topic. You've seen the way that you actually can do an action. We're not asking them to implement a policy, right? We're telling them that they can solve for their own impact. You vote on the negative here on the risk of solvency because we're the only ones to do so. We're going to do a lot of the work on the K page. Now, on the K page proper, first the extension of the thesis. Space is sacred. The erasure of those relationships to space constitute ontological bounds that severance indigenous people from relationships with space and land that further sells colonialism by guaranteeing the erasure of the native people. Numerous examples from the wouldn't see evidence prove lots of native people have spiritual relationships to space that gets erased via their theorization of space. We're going to do a link extension work here. Extend the means evidence. There's three arguments. It goes cold, hard, conceded. First is the rationalism that Marxism is invested into European drive to rationalize the world, which indigenous spirituality is thrown away for rational development because we only see the world through a material way. That's bad. A. It dooms Marxism to produce European ideology like capitalism because they can never come in terms of relationality. B. Like kills indigenous spirituality. That's violent. C. That pathologizes indigenous spirituality. Marx called us primitive. Two is in the industrialization. This type of constant environmental degradation in the world is not capitalism, but rather Western industrial relationships to land that allow for the exploitation of resources because we are encouraged to take without giving back in either Marxism or capitalism because Western decisions do not view nature as something that we have to give back to. The impact is linked to staff because the scenarios of the world is happening right now, like oceans and pandemic, but not by capitalism and space, but relationships to land that are battling the alternative conflicted relationships. The alternative solves case, but not vice versa. Three is about colonialism. This at the defense of shifting material production as a solution to colonialism is bad because the settler colonial understandings of the world because even non-capitalist states engage in colonialism proven by the USSR, trampling indigenous people in Siberia to make way for production, or China engaging neocolonialism in Africa. What this means that the approach to revolutionary politics that starts with class stops the reproduction, class stops recreates the colonialism improves while the alternative is necessary, and we will extend the we're going to extend the shamans and whole in 19 evidence, which is an excellent top. They have conceded it. Talk about how their own evidence looks at space as terrible, as something spacey, as something anti-Marxist and communist view, which is definitely a bad understanding. Onto the permutation, we're going to actually answer the root cause debate. Years is definitely wrong. They use the East India Company as an example, but this is colonialism, not settler colonialism. Two, Marxist understanding of ownership don't solve. We did the work on the link page. Three, settlers came to colonize the Americas not because of capitalism, because of things like manifest necessity and European supremacy, which means that their relationships to land inherently done. They have not explained why in the 1AR their relationships to land aren't there. They say that we use space as well, but we have explained in our link extension and in our examples how indigenous people have different relationships with space. Now onto the counter. We're going to address the framing page and the counter roll of the ballot. Here they say the root that they say that the counter roll of the ballot is something about resisting capitalist attraction. However, this is way too new in the 1AR and doesn't make any sense. We're going to be answering the human dignity stuff here. We can't weigh under human dignity. It has nothing to do that. And cross-examination. When I ask them, it's just reaching a threat, but we went under human dignity as well. So rendering space is something to be used even by Marxists is definitely bad and violates the human dignity of indigenous people. Second of all, they have conceded the accountability. This side, which is called like any sort of like weighing the ass means settler roots to ensure lack of accountability for anti-native representation. Only our laws ensures we can challenge these balanced representations, which internally turns their sort of like fairness arguments and means that they can't do they can't perm. We're gonna answer the perm debate here proper. First, we're going to extend the alternative. The alternative is to conceptualize space through the lens of relationality. Our space is governed by overlapping layers of care and responsibility that dictate how humans should interact with and relate to space. Instead of erasing those relationships and reducing space to an empty resource for the taking, you should endorse the method of plural relationality that understands we can never take without giving back, and we have to respect the agency of the non-human. That's mutually exclusive to the method of analyzing the world, which is the entire link debate. That means the alternative solves the app, but the app doesn't solve the link. Only understanding of mutual obligations to space can create a sustainable relationship to space aspiration that doesn't replicate colonial logic. We're more anti-capitalist than you are. The 1AC maintains things like NASA and military appropriation, which recreates the logic contamination. The government also have the spatial space, which means that, again, the affirmative just doesn't solve. You vote neg on the risk of solvency. Now on the permutation proper, first they frame the way first on the permutation proper, say perm do both, but there's no net benefit insofar as they're not solving for any other impacts. And they say that solvency is not necessary. You only have a bunch of floating impacts that don't make sense in the context of the 1AC. There's no net benefit. They say that multiple perspectives solve. However, their perspective is definitely bad. We have actually three separate discounts as to why like a red colonial understanding of space is bad. They have conceded the means evidence coming out. All they have on the page is perm do both and the root cause, which we've already addressed. First, and there's three terminal defects to the app solving capitalism exploitation. One, the app doesn't do it. They will just take more stuff from the ocean. They sort of like don't solve for capitalism on Earth. But two, even if that happens, governments just shift to public space exploration. NASA will just spend money going to space, which they have conceded. Back to the perm. Frame the way you frame the round through the way we should view the world. The app isn't a policy action, it's just a method. If we could take a mindset of the app, it makes no sense, especially if the 1AR didn't explain how to implement the action of the alternative and the action of the app, which means you vote negative here. Listen, they don't solve for anything. You vote neg on a risk of solvency, or you vote on the means evidence that was cold hard conceded. Read it after the round. It does an excellent job explaining how Marx's understanding of space is bad and recreates colonial logic.
I'm going to take the remaining 1 minute and 31 seconds of my prep. So that's the end of prep. So it's just going to go, on the AC, observation, and then just quickly down the advantage, and then the K. Everybody ready?
Ready.
So first on the advantage, my opponent doesn't at all engage with the warrant that we have laid out. They just talk about how there's policy asked on this topic. We have to prove solvency. But again, there's no way to prove solvency when there's no action to solve and no actor to engage in that action. This is the warrant that we've used. So all the app has to do is prove that a private appropriation of outer space is unjust, and we do this. And they don't disagree with us. They just talk about how like we're sort of the colonialists. Like again, it's private appropriation of outer space is bad and unjust because it exacerbates capitalism, which is bad, and also increases settler colonialism, so it's just bad generally, and the firm solves all of this. We prove that it is unjust. This is the only obligation the app has in this round, because there's no possible alternative without tacking on to words of the resolution, which would render the resolution absolutely meaningless and infinitely regressive. They don't engage with these arguments at all, and the guy conceded. This shows that the only obligation the app is to prove that private appropriation of outer space is unjust, and we clearly do this. As we clearly show you that through my Hart and Negri 2000 card that talks about how capitalism equals expansion, and how Dickinson shows that the outer space serves as a spatial fix that private appropriation will use to supercharge, and all these impacts. We basically show that it increases capitalism, and capitalism is bad because it causes all these existential impacts, but also violates human dignity, and capitalism is bad under their own impact because it increases other colonialism. So therefore, it is bad, it's unjust, so therefore, we have met our obligation. Now on to the K. So first, a couple things. On our root cause argument, they talk about how the East Indian Company is not an example of settler colonial violence, and that the reason why colonization and settler colonial violence happened in the, North America in the first place was because like manifest destiny. The manifest destiny was this ideology constructed by through capitalism. They deserved this land. They wanted this land to become their property. We can clearly see that the root cause of settler violence was capitalism. The reason why they erased these native people and stole their land is because they wanted to own it as property. We're clearly winning a root cause here. So criticizing capitalism is not necessarily a bad thing. And we root cause them, so we also criticize them. So perm works perfectly fine. And they have this. The only diss that they really have is this there's Marxist colonialism. First off, we don't necessarily endorse a certain brand of anti-capitalism. We're just anti-cap. And we prove it. And secondly, the Soviet Union wasn't really Marxist in the first place. It was, hijacked by authoritarianism and fetishized the capitalist system of America. So that's why I engage in this sense of production. So the Soviet Union really isn't the best example. And then onto the perm. The only response to the perm, they have two. The first is that there's no net benefit. We don't have to prove a net benefit. This is because there's no difference in the AF and the neg. We agree with the neg. All of this stuff is bad. It's not a reason why you vote neg. There's no reason to not vote AF. And they talk about this bad perspective. Again, we're literally criticizing the same structural violence that caused settler colonial violence in the same sort of language and jargon. All of this stuff is the same. You're just voting voting AF because they provide no unique reason to vote neg. It is literally the same thing. We're all criticizing private appropriation out of space. It is unjust. You vote AF right there. Again, on the framework debate, on the counter roll of the ballot, they just talk how this is new, but it was a reaction to their roll of the ballot. It's not new. It's a counter roll of the ballot to their roll of the ballot. We don't introduce a roll of the ballot. So then if we're winning the root cause argument, you can use a roll of the ballot of deconstructing capitalism. Even under their roll of the ballot, we're still winning because the perm solves for all of this. Thus, you vote AF. Good round.
Yep.
Okay. This was a good debate. I'm going to pull up, hold on, let me get this. Okay. This was a good debate. I voted negative. So here's how I decided this round. First, I looked at the framework debate. I think the negatives I had here because of conceded 1NC accountability dissent and the lack of 2AR push means I used the role of the ballot of incommensurability, focus on set call violence first, and step away from whataboutism. Observation debate, I think the AF is probably slightly ahead on here that they don't defend an action. The only 2 in our arg on this flow is that the lack of defense on an action means it's a methods debate, which is kind of conceding the argument that the AF doesn't defend an action because otherwise it's like regressive and all that other stuff. Root cause debate, assertions made on both sides without warrants means it's largely irresolvable. The 2AR claims that Manifest Destiny was constructed primarily because settlers wanted to own the land as property, but there's no warrant or evidence for this argument, and you probably should have a card, or at least some sort of analysis as to why, or like some historical document or something that proves that Manifest Destiny was constructed because of property. The 2AR should have spent longer extending their ontology claims as an answer, the 2NR. I wrote this as 2AR in my RFD, you should just it's supposed to say 2NR. The 2NR should have spent longer extending their ontology claims as an answer, but the lack of 2AR warranting means it's not really that damning, the fact that you didn't develop your answer to the root cause debate that much. But definitely in the 2NR, that's something you should improve on, is extend your ontology claims a little bit more. The main issue, because I'm using the role of the ballot and because I've come to all this framing observations, the next thing I have to look at is the links. The main issue with the 2AR is that, in my opinion, on these links debate, is that A, it's slightly too late, and B, it fails to make some of the line-by-line arguments on the links, even if I think you're right that winning the observation debate takes out the links. This is an argument made slightly too late. First of all, on the means card link, the 2AR made the argument that we don't defend a specific anti-capitalism. This is a good argument, and an argument that I said, like right before the 1AR, I said, oh, the 1AR should make this argument, but this is an argument made in the 2AR and not the 1AR, which is too late when you straight up concede the means card. Especially when the 1AR talks in multiple places about a Marxist perspective, even though I think you only use the word Marxist perspectives like twice in the 1AR, and I do think the link is, like, from a truth perspective, quite weak. I'm willing to give them a lot of leeway here because this argument was made in the 2AR, not the 1AR, and it was conceded. Basically, I do think this means link is quite weak if you win that you don't defend a specific action, but the fact that the role of the ballot is basically set call first, and the AF concedes that there's no net benefit to the perm, means the risk of a link is sufficient. That, combined with the fact that the 2AR answers were slightly late, means that the means link is definitely one place that I can negate. The second place I can negate is the space link. I think your answers to it in the 1AR were pretty, decent, and were also kind of, not line by line that well by the 2NR extension of the space link, such as the argument that the neg also wants to use space even if it's using it in different ways, but the 2NR doesn't extend those answers to this link, which means that I do get some leeway from the 2NR space link, which is also probably another risk of a link in place I can negate. Basically, long and short of it is, even though the AF doesn't suspend a specific implementation, the fact that there's no net benefit to the perm and the fact that the neg is winning framework means all I have to believe is a risk of a link, and the newness of the 2AR's arguments, even though they're relatively true, means that there is a risk of a link, and I negate. Specific feedback on the AF, I like the fact that you had a framework with the AF. A lot of, cap and chaos, in my opinion, should still have frameworks because otherwise how do you weigh impacts that aren't related to your K? So I like that. Even some scenarios before the 1AR that you could probably go for under UTIL, that's strategic, I think. The way the AF is written is pretty strategic. I think you could probably stand up and make args that, yeah, okay, this is the thing I said earlier. You can make the 2AR arg in the 1AR that you aren't a specific type of Marxism, which probably takes out their argument. You could even couple this with a cross-ex question. Do you think capitalism is bad? They'll probably say yes. And then you're just like, okay, then we agree. They're talking about USSR, China. That's not us. We don't defend an action, extend our observation, and then win it. And then you're pretty much good on that argument. In terms of the other 1AR thing on the space link, I think you should probably either change the card or just make an argument that you only defend the highlighted part of the cards. Maybe be sure, if it says something that's obviously bad, then we'll defend it. But if it's just a link or something, we're only going to defend the parts that we actually say. And maybe make that argument. As well as the other arguments made on the space link. And those are the main comments. Just needs to be, the 2AR args were good, should have been a little earlier. That's the main comments for the AF. For the neg, main comments, to talk about this no solvency arg you're talking about, on a truth level, by the way, I think the AF should have to defend solvency on this topic. And I'm just going to, so real quick, my justification for this is based on the idea of causality, right? If the AF is claiming, I think that this is what the negative should say in any of these debates where the AF stands up and tries to claim we don't defend solvency. In my opinion, solvency on this topic is interesting because it's a question of the framework you run, not a question of the plan. And the reason for this is because if you are saying we have to value human dignity, right? And you're saying capitalism causes human dignity to be worse. For something to cause something else, right? For something to have that causal relationship, you need to prove two things. First of all, you need to prove that when capitalism is there, human dignity is worse, which is sort of what the AF meets. But you also need to prove that capitalism is unique, right? In that without capitalism, human dignity would be better. Because otherwise, you're not proving a causal relationship, right? If human dignity is super bad under capitalism, but it's also super bad under every other economic system, then you can't say that capitalism is the thing that causes human dignity to be worse. Human dignity is just worse in every scenario, right? I think that means that because of this uniqueness requirement to prove causality, apps that have a causal framework, i.e. X causes Y, that's bad, something causes human dignity, that makes it bad, have to defend solvency on this topic. That doesn't necessarily mean they have to defend a governmental action, but you need to defend some sort of counterfactual, and you need to prove that without the thing that you are saying is doing the causing, there wouldn't be the issue, right? Because you need to prove uniqueness for this causality to be a thing. You need necessity and uniqueness. And I think that's the argument that Neg should make on this topic whenever the app tries to stand up and claim no solvency. That doesn't mean I wouldn't make this no solvency claims. What it means I would do in terms of strategic app writing is I would just, in the 1AR, I would keep your observations, because not everyone's going to know how to answer them, but I would stand up and I would also have a solvency card in the 1AC in case they accurately answer it, right? So have a solvency card, be like, this is just in case, if they ask you in cross-X, be like, this is just in case you somehow win that we need to prove solvency, right? But, yeah. In terms of, like, that might not have been strategic in this round in terms of, like, links to Ks, that probably would have strengthened their link, but at the same time, in terms of a truth value, I think it's probably necessary. So, I don't know.
Would the solvency card basically claim that, like, what exactly would that solvency card claim? Like, banning private appropriation solves for capitalism, or capitalism?
You just need to prove some sort of counterfactual, right? You need to prove that without private appropriation of outer space, this could be enforced through a ban, or it could be enforced through just like some sort of movements-based action, right? Because that's one of the nice things about this topic. The idea of causality just requires a counterfactual. It doesn't require a specific method of implementing that counterfactual. So you don't have to be Marxism. You don't have to be governmental action on this topic necessarily. You just have to prove that if you have a consequentialist framework, you need to prove that without private appropriation of outer space in some way, there wouldn't be human dignity harms, right? There wouldn't be harms to human dignity. How you do that is kind of up to you, like what cards you cut and stuff like that. You can claim to solve all of capitalism, or you can claim to just solve this part of it, and that's like uniquely good because of like linear offense or something. I don't know, but I feel like you should have a solvency card. Again, still keep the observation because it's strategic and they might not know how to answer it. Yeah. Okay, that's the main thing. Okay, that was like a sidetrack. Rest of the feedback for the negative, so mainly I think winning these links kind of requires like this sort of causal analysis that I was talking about earlier, and winning that the app is defending something. I think that you need to isolate in cross-X what the app's solution to capitalism is. You're kind of taking for granted that it's like Marxism, which the 2AR, if they'd made that argument earlier, would like leave you open to. So you should just like push them and like maybe push them in like what theorists they're like drawing from or something like that. I don't know how you would, like, you can try to make like some tricky cross-X questions that get them to admit that they're drawing on Marxism. But yeah, maybe think about something like that. And then if you can admit that like even their analysis of the harms is drawing on Marxism, you probably don't necessarily even need to win the observation debate, because you can just be like, their analysis of the harms is what's bad. And then this debate is about whose analysis of the harms is better under their observation. Okay, let's see. Okay, the only other thing on the 2R is, again, go slower. Oh, yeah, sorry, this is one other thing. You were a little bit unclear on the 2R, so maybe go a little bit slower, and extend your ontology claims on the root cause debate. And that's basically all my feedback.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for judging.
Good debate, everyone.
Could you send the recording to me, to my email? I'm going to drop it in chat.
I will. Is it okay if I, like, post it on, like, YouTube or something? Because that was kind of, like, is that cool with both of you? It's fine if not.
And can you send it to my email as well? And
I will.
What YouTube account are you using?
I'm going to make a new one. This is the first time I've, like, done this, but it'd probably just be under my name, so under, like, Lucas Krause. I'll send it to you all as well. Send me an email on my paradigm, and I'll go through at the end of the tournament and then reply to all the emails from people who've asked for the recording.
Yeah, I would just like to see the YouTube account, because I have a bunch of novices this year who that type of stuff would be great for.
Yeah, I'm just going to start recording all my rounds. Cool.
Thank you so much for that.
Good round.
Okay.
Bye.